Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Welcome to episode 1 of Message in the Middle with Marianne. As you probably already heard, my goal is to take a deep dive into books that we can learn from and take messages out of or take little nuggets of wisdom from and use them to navigate our daily lives. To kick us off, I chose a book by Glennon Doyle called Carry On Warrior, The Power of Embracing Your Messy, Beautiful Life. Before we dig in though, I want to be completely transparent as to why I chose the book. I can't say that I read it first and fell in love with it, though you will hear that I can really relate to a lot of the topics in it, and I'll explain that a little more later. But the real reason that I chose this book was primarily the title. I was drawn to it because I love everything about the name and what it stands for, and I think it really ties into this podcast and what I'm trying to do here. Life is unpredictable, for sure. And as Glennon points out, and I firmly believe, it's also brutal. It's a mix of brutal and beautiful all at the same time. And pretending it's not messy, it won't help us navigate through it or help us build meaningful relationships. I think our best shot at doing well in this life requires us to figure out how to get back up when we get pushed down, how to embrace our weaknesses and quirks, and how to walk through life with kindness, authenticity, forgiveness for ourselves and others, and to find gratitude. And I think Glennon touches on all of those things in this book. Okay, so now that you know the reason behind why I chose the book, let's get started. Like most books in the self-help, self-development genre, it came with some things that totally resonated with me and others that I couldn't really get behind. Let's start with the latter. I think that Glennon's a little over the top with her religion references. I, too, believe in God and consider myself a Baptist, but there were lots of points in the book where her references were just a little too, weird for me, maybe. For me, she took that to a point where maybe a little bit too far. Then there's politics. So she sneaks some politics in here or there. It's not heavy, but there's just enough where I think maybe it would have been better if she could have left those pieces out of the book. The next thing would be her natural state. Her natural state is probably just a little too negative for me, but hey, that's her, so I can't fault her for that. And then lastly, I'll say that the flow of some of her stories, they weren't completely developed and they didn't flow as naturally as I would have liked chronologically. I think that's because this was a culmination of passages from her blog online and it wasn't like a fully chapter by chapter book. So my guess is that's sort of how things sometimes fell out of chronological order. But for me, at points, that was a little bit hard to follow. Okay, so on with the good stuff. The nuggets we can take away and try to utilize in our own lives as we go forward or relate to. So Glennon shares the really hard parts of her life in this book. It's the type of stuff I would say that most of us try to pretty up or we completely hide, but not Glennon. She does the opposite. She lays it all out, puts it all on the line in a raw and vulnerable way. She's fully transparent about how she was a drug addict, had bulimia, got pregnant by a man she hardly knew, and how she had to make some decisions around those things to become a mom and a wife, and it was all a little less than ideal. And as she tells her story, she reminds us that there's freedom in recognizing our brokenness. And she continuously encourages us to always be our true selves and to have self-awareness. And on that note, it's something I could really relate to. self-awareness is a game changer in my opinion. In my 25 years of building and managing high-performing teams in corporate America, I could definitely always tell which of my employees were fully self-aware and those that weren't. The ones that could look themselves in the mirror and really understood who they were easy to have difficult conversations with, and they were really great at utilizing to help build a really strong team. You could have honest conversations with them. You could talk to them about why it made sense to pair them up with other resources that complement their skill sets. You could encourage collaboration and teach them that it's okay to share the limelight with other people that are stronger in certain areas than they were. It was about everyone as a team and not individuals. It minimized competition and it encouraged everyone to feel confident in knowing that even if they were weak in an area, it didn't matter. They weren't alone, and it was about the strength of the whole team. The thing is, though, until you can really see yourself, and I mean really see yourself, it's almost impossible to be part of something like that. You have to understand your strengths and limitations and learn to navigate around them with ease. And for that, self-awareness is a must. Building on that topic of self-awareness, there's another part in the book where Glennon says, the truth can't be stuffed down with food, booze, exercise, or cutting or shopping for long. And boy, isn't that the truth? I think you have to really become self-aware and recognize where those things fit in your life. How many of you, like me, have used food, booze, exercise, work, or some combination of them to hide from life at some point? When things got tough or there was a situation you just didn't want to deal with, it's easy to bury your head and not have to face it. Now at 53, I recognize those patterns and I'm working really hard to overcome them and to make peace with some of the choices I made in the past. The truth is, I wasn't always there for my family like I wish I should have been. I definitely buried myself in work to avoid dealing with some difficult situations and periods of time in my life. And I also definitely used food for many years to manage my emotions. Coming to terms with that and really understanding where it fits in my life and how to try to avoid it was a big thing for me. As Glennon points out, though, I was who I was at the time, and I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. Today, I know more, and today I do better. But there's no room for shame or regret. I need to recognize that I did the best I could in those moments, make peace with it, and go forward in a healthier, more positive way. Glennon goes on to tell us story after story about her life and the way she interacts with those around her. When she does it, she doesn't present us an image of a perfect family or of being mother of the year or a perfect wife. Even so, it's obvious that she loves her children and she finds joy in motherhood. She just does it all in such an unconventional way that I can see why some might question it. Some might even say it's the wrong way. In fact, some do say she does it in the wrong way. But as I thought about that, I found myself thinking, is it really wrong? I mean, she fulfills their basic needs. She's teaching them love and kindness and inclusion. So what's really wrong about any of that? It also made me reflect on the way I look at my daughter as a mom. When she first became a mother, it definitely took me a minute to find the right balance of being helpful and supportive without being judgmental. It's true, she would rather serve chicken nuggets for dinner than a roast with vegetables. And she doesn't worry if my granddaughter looks like she played in the dirt all day. And she doesn't worry if every toy is out all at the same time. But she does make sure my granddaughter is filled with love and kindness and fun, and that she has learning opportunities every single day. And when I watch them together, there is some type of magic between them, and I know without a doubt she is an exceptional mother, even if she doesn't do it always in a conventional way. I think that's okay, and I think the same can be said for Glennon. She's unconventional, yes, but she shows time and time again that she's a great mom. I can recall a passage where she's talking to her son Chase, midway in the book. It's after his pet fish died. And Chase asks why we're put on this earth where things hurt and why we love things that die. And Glennon tells him that we don't love people and animals because we will have them forever. We love them because loving them changes us, makes us better, healthier, kinder, and more real. She said that even if animals and people leave, even if they die, they leave us better. Boy, what a great lesson to teach our children, right? And to remind us too, in a time when so many of us have gone through so much pain, so much loss and suffering over the last few years, sometimes we can get caught up in that. But it's important to remember how much loving those people, even if they left us, how much they changed us for the better, and how much it brought into our lives in the first place, and how lucky we were to have had them to love at all. Another topic in the book that Glennon talks about is focused around a quote. For some kids, the classroom setting is the place where their genius is hardest to see and their challenges are easiest to see. If we be patient and calm and we keep believing, we will eventually see the magic of each child. Boy, did I learn this one firsthand as a mom of two very different children. For the longest time, I had this vision that both my girls would interact with friends, they would love school and learning, they'd go to college, in a very typical educational experience, the way I did. But the truth is that one of my girls learns very differently. She has ADHD and her brain is wired differently. She doesn't like to be around a lot of people, and she learns best through applied learning and not in a typical classroom setting. She excels, but in her own way and on her own terms. And it took me a little bit to figure this out, and there were definitely years of pushing and pulling. But once I realized that the typical classroom doesn't bring out the best in every child, and that they are all different and all have different needs and all need different things to thrive, life definitely got easier to navigate and a lot more peaceful. Along that same train of thought, Glennon talks about how every child is gifted in a different way, and for some it takes longer to find the gift than others. I think about this because I know for myself and for friends of mine that as a parent, it's difficult to be patient. It's difficult to sit on the sidelines and watch your child as they try to figure it out and sometimes take missteps. But we need to be confident in knowing that each child will find their gift. And we need to be patient because that timeline can be different for everyone. I know it's hard, but the truth is they do figure it out eventually. We just need to believe in them and believe in the process and allow them the time they need to flourish in their own way. There's another concept that Glennon talks about that I want to hit on. It's the concept of time. Glennon talks about it in two modes of time. She says there is Chronos time, which is everyday time, the time you spend at work and school and in line and driving. It's kind of that all around uneventful, boring time. It's a time that fills up most days. But then there's another time. It's more special and it's called Kairos time or God's time. And she talks about the need to take note of any of those special moments so we can be grateful for them. She suggests naming the moment when we recognize it. In her book, she says, Kairos time, like it could be something just as simple as seeing a rainbow or the first flower of spring, and she still recommends calling it out. And I thought about that, and I actually agree with it. I think that it's super important to be grateful every day, to be grateful for the little things in our life. And I think her concept of calling them out makes a lot of sense. I think that you won't necessarily remember 2 weeks from now that on a Tuesday night, 2 weeks ago, you saw the moon, a whole full moon, and thought it was beautiful. But if you call out these kind of moments in the times that they happen, I do think 2 weeks from now, when you can look back, you'll say, wow, I had a lot of those little moments, those little points of gratitude that I called out during my week. And I think that's important to help us string them together and kind of have that thought process around the fact that we have a lot to be grateful for, because sometimes we can lose sight of that in our everyday lives. Sometimes we get caught up looking for these big miracles, and It's the small things that happen every single day, every single week that add up to a life that we really should be grateful for. Another area that Glennon hits on is warning about chasing perfection. For me, I could relate to this one on so many levels. I've always been a bit of an A personality, a perfectionist who tries to do everything in a fully baked fashion, fully researched, fully planned, fully vetted. You know the type. I think some of you can probably fit into that bucket as well. So imagine me deciding to launch a podcast at the end of last year, knowing it's something that I feel very passionate about trying to do so I can connect with more people, but also knowing that I have no idea what to do. So of course, I did what I do, and I researched and I took classes and I hung out with people that are doing the same thing that I want to do. I learned the basic about the tech needs, and I purchased the equipment and the software and the licenses needed to go forward. But naturally, even after doing all that, perfectionism came popping in, and I found a zillion reasons to keep telling myself that I wasn't ready. I didn't have the editing down perfectly. I wasn't sure exactly what format to follow, which one would work best. I was concerned with what people might think if it doesn't come out good enough. But I kept finding signs that told me good enough was, in fact, good enough. I mean, isn't that exactly what we should be striving for? Good enough? Not in a sense where we should take all the shortcuts and not do the work. We need to do the work. But chasing perfection is like being on a hamster wheel. I mean, how fast can you run and for how long to never ever reach the goal? That's no way to operate. You can't grow that way. Leveling up requires stepping out of your comfort zone. It requires you to feel uncomfortable as you flex. And as Glennon says, if you feel something calling you to dance or write or paint or sing, refuse to worry about whether you're not good enough. Just do it. Be generous. Offer a gift to the world that no one else can offer. Yourself. And the truth is, I've felt this kind of calling for many years, but I just ignored the whispers and got caught up in life and kind of forgot what I love to do. So now I'm listening, and I'm thankful to have this opportunity. And like the quote in the book says, the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. In closing, I guess I just want to remind you all to remember that lesson too, because life is short. And we all deserve a chance to be our authentic selves and to chase our dreams. If you can't remember what that looks like for you, try to remember what you dreamt of as a child, or try to notice what activities you do now where you can lose yourself and lose track of all time. There is messages hidden in that. And know that as long as you wake up each day, it's a gift. A chance to reset, to start over, to dream bigger, and to do things differently. As Glennon Doyle noted in her book, it's a chance to be a warrior and to embrace your messy, beautiful life. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.